What's up, Long Beach? I'm your host, Julia Goldman, and you're listening to Season 3, Episode 3 of Artist Banter, a daily 49er original podcast that delves into the many manifestations of artistry within our local scene. Today, we're featuring Veronica Swift, vocalist and jazz performer from Charlottesville, Virginia. She's currently touring and performing her new self-titled album, Veronica Swift, on October 17th at Pepperdine University in Malibu, California. Here's a snippet.
You tear down my reason. Your sex I can smell. You make me so perfect now. Help me become somebody else. I wanna hunt you like an animal. I wanna feel you from the inside.
That was Closer from Veronica Swift's new self-titled album. Veronica, thank you so much for meeting with me today.
Hey, Julia, nice to meet you. You're not so far away from me. I'm Hills, and it's just nice to finally I just moved to LA about a year ago, so it's
Mm-hmm.
nice to feel a sense of community out here.
Oh, welcome to the town.
Thank you.
Could you tell me a little bit about your new album?
Absolutely. For those who are just getting to know me, of course, if you look me up, you'll probably find a lot of jazz. That's because I grew up in a jazz musician family. For 20 years, I have had a career of singing in jazz clubs, jazz festivals. When I was a kid, that was just my way of life. It wasn't like
Mm-hmm.
the world I wanted to be in. I wanted to sing rock and roll. I wanted to sing classical music and funk and soul. And everybody listening doesn't just listen to one genre of music all the time, right? And I feel like a lot of artists and singers too, like they want to explore the multiple facets of their personalities. So that's what this record is about. It's the first time in my life that I get to show people the full spectrum of my personality, musically and personally.
That's great. Yeah, specifically on that note, I've seen your music, at least this album, be described as transgenre. Could you a little bit further elaborate on what that means and how you specifically incorporate that into your album?
Sure. Well, first off, I wanted to create a world that wasn't based off labels and classifications, whether it was genre or, like fashion or sexuality, insert word here. And as also because the LGBTQ community is important to me, I wanted to create a place where musically I could get the point across that we don't have to like label ourselves be so quick to we're not this or that, but it's a full spectrum and embrace the middle, the gray area in between. That's what makes life
Mm-hmm.
interesting. And so that's why I call this project transgenre, because then I get to sing jazz and sing rock and embrace my Queen uh, roots, like the band Queen, and
Yeah.
embrace my bebop roots and classical roots. And it all makes sense in one place because the artistry is Veronica
Hmm.
Swift. It's not this or that. And I hope
Yeah.
that communicates in the social context as well.
I think that is kind of a staple of jazz as well. It's innovative toward more modern sense, but yeah.
Absolutely. And
What?
then that trans genre word, a lot of course, I get questions about the relationship to the trans community and and furthermore LGBTQ
Mm,
community. And I'm hoping that that comes across as a parallel because what I've experienced musically, actually a lot of my trans fans are like, this totally speaks to what I'm going through in my
mhm.
transition. So even though it's a musical transition for me or a musical coming out for me, that this does translate in that way as well.
Oh, wow. You kind of mentioned the different historical genres of jazz. Um, what is the significance of it, and what do you draw from them in your music?
Well, in regards to just jazz, there's a lot of references on this album. If you listen to this record, you'll hear bossa nova, you'll hear Django Reinhardt, gypsy, kind of like the French Django Reinhardt jazz. You'll hear old Hollywood vaudeville of the Judy Garlands, and then you'll hear bebop. And the key with this album is to connect genres, the through lines through these genres, be it jazz or classical or whatever, and to tell a new story and use the references that date back hundreds of years that inform the more modern style of music that inform who you are today. And so I've been choosing to do that through the lyrics, through the musical arrangements as well. For example, on Closer, you'll hear the bass line is the same bass line as the Nine Inch Nails version. When you break down the Nine Inch Nails version to just the core elements, that bass line and the melody and lyrics, that's carried on through in our more kind of James Brown Cold Sweat rendition.
Hmm.
But it pays homage to both of these uh, brilliant artistries of James Brown and Trent Reznor by maintaining that fundamental element that is part of the core, original intent of the arranger and producer and composer. So that's one key element that has to be carried on through all these arrangements.
Hmm. Is this element like of incorporating different genres? Is this something that's always existed within your music, or just something that you're beginning?
It's something that has always been there as the fueling, the guiding trajectory, but because of the world I was born into, the jazz world, there was,
Hmm.
it's kind of like, do you watch The Crown? Do you know
I
that show?
haven't.
It's a fun show. I love it.
Hmm.
Really well written. But I see a parallel with having been born into the jazz industry. It's like being born into the royal family. My parents are world-renowned famous jazz musicians, and because of
Hmm.
that, there has been a sort of underlying pressure or expectation on me to carry that tradition and be a part of
Hmm.
that. And you are a great jazz singer, so you have to do that. And that's never something I wanted to do in the passion sense, right? It's not singing jazz is not what has fueled my goals. This
Hmm.
this concept of transgenre, I have been patient and 10, 20 years of patiently waiting for the right moment. And each record that came before this one, I introduced elements on my last record, The Spitter Earth, which came out in 21. I started to
Hmm.
introduce a little bit more of like fusion and rock to kind of, test the waters and show the audience, this is where we're headed. So why don't, if you want to come with us, then here comes this record with all the genres, rock, funk, soul, fusion, classical, jazz. And this hopefully gives the fans who have followed us on this journey insight as to where we're headed next, which is maybe a little more theatrical rock and original music of mine. So each
Yeah.
record just it's like David Bowie's discography. I mean, he's changed with every album, and that's what's the cohesive thing is just
Hmm.
him, David Bowie.
Yeah. It's like taking your roots and kind of like emerging with your individuality. That's what
Yeah,
it seems like to me with what
absolutely.
you describe as transgenre.
And that's a universal concept. You don't have to be an artist to know what that feels like. That's just the things that you collect, the
Hmm.
bits of information and what you learn through relationships and school and work and all these things that family troubles and whatever life throws your way, that informs who you are and choosing what
Hmm.
to act on and what to include in that, your
Yeah,
personality.
absolutely. As you mentioned earlier with your trans friends or LGBTQ plus fans that have found some sort of like resonation with your music. Yeah, I think it is a theme of life.
Absolutely. And
Um,
then we're really lucky in this time to kind of see some of these the availability to call upon these different sides of your personality, at least in a musical sense. Artists are becoming not, it's really hard to, you know, put an artist in a box these days. Like you see a lot of indie artists and alternative bands and like Kamasi Washington, for example, he's on How to Pimp a Butterfly, and all this mixed genre thing is starting to really become a part of mainstream society, which I think is cool.
mm. Was that a frustration for you, kind of being born into the jazz world and being put into a box?
Yeah, it was, and I didn't really know how to convey that frustration. I could try musically, but still, even then, just within the jazz idiom there was not a place for those frustrations to really go. Also,
Mhm.
for those who haven't seen me perform, I'm like very reminiscent of like Freddie Mercury and the bombastic performing, and I'm jumping and head banging, and it's all very theatrical rock and roll. That
Mhm.
is something I'd never been able to express until just now. So yeah, it was frustrating and just feeling like the constraint and the repress, and not being able, also not wanting to turn my back on my heritage either. It's not like I'm
Mhm.
throwing up the middle fingers to a
Yeah,
music that bore me, but mhm.
absolutely. What has allowed you to overcome these hurdles and flourish as you are today? Like where the point you are now?
Yeah, that's really good questions. And I think these are what's allowed me to flourish is just, before I never really looked at my sex as having been, like me being a female in the industry. I never thought
Mhm.
about it much because I was always focused on the music, and I never took the chance to kind of step outside of myself and look at actually how being a female in a male-dominated industry can be a drawback, right? It can, and in a way, has fueled my this new embracing of my strength as like, no, this is being a female in this industry is a strength. And
Mhm.
I used to be very, especially when I was just singing jazz, I was very passive. That was a very like I kind of just let people walk all over me. And it wasn't until I started putting my original music and the rock and roll into my show where I started to then come into myself and find the power. Also, surrounding yourself, and this goes for everybody listening, you got to surround yourself with people that enrich and support, your goals and who you are and challenge you, but in like a way that is going to be for the betterment of both of your relationship with whoever it is, if it's your bandmates or if it's your friends, you want to surround yourself with good, supportive people, not people
Mhm.
that want to like, yeah, like,
Who
man,
recognize you as an individual beyond just like being a marker of a woman or yeah, exactly.
absolutely, absolutely.
What other frustrations did you have within that time? What you were talking about being a woman in the music industry in a male-dominated field.
The frustrations were more things that were happening to me in my life. Like I
Hmm.
said, at that time, I didn't really consider the female aspect of what some of my frustrations were, and that when I then started to consider that, I had to do my internal work on
Hmm.
becoming stronger and you know
Yeah.
buying for myself. But back then, I was experiencing a lot. This when we're talking back then, we're talking like the years of 2012 to 2018 or 19.
Hmm.
Those are my peak. Like I'm on a trajectory of being a jazz singer here, going to
Yeah.
music school, University of Miami. I was experiencing these frustrations of academia and
Hmm.
being a very artistic thinker and like having to conform to a curriculum in some ways for my own good, to be to learn certain skills, get certain skills that I didn't have before. But because of that, that comes with that is the academia environment, which
Hmm.
can be difficult. Anyone who's been in music school or arts programs, any school is just hard. Um, and then also, of course, I lost my house in a house fire, and my father passed away. We had cancer, and just experiencing so much loss and just how it comes all at once, just one
Yeah.
thing after the
Oh,
next.
absolutely.
When it
Yeah.
rains, it pours, right? So just I was trying to navigate, and also being a
Mhm.
young 20s person, just going through relationships of being in abusive relationships and trying to find my strength. And yeah, I mean, it was
Yeah.
tumultuous. So the last thing on my list was of course like my own personal health. I was trying to just make it through, right?
As a woman, you do endure that pain alone, in many ways, and it's not recognized. And I think what you were saying earlier about surrounding yourself with people who look at you like an individual and support you and wish for the best, I think that's a great thing to have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've been so lucky. I just recently started a couple years ago where well he's part of this project came about because of our relationship and our working
Hmm.
relationship. Brian Viglione of the Dresden Dolls. The Dresden Dolls have been one of my biggest influences artistically, musically, everything. Just
Hmm.
that was one of the only bands that I really found that current bands when I was like a teenager that I could look to for guidance and like spiritual and artistic guidance. And so Brian, because I recorded a Dresden Dolls song on my album before this one back in 21, Brian reached out and we've been working together, playing together ever since. And he has been, because he's been where I've been, he's, a little older. The Dresden Dolls
Hmm.
went through the same exact thing, trying to like establish their brand by being who they are, not by conforming. So he's been super supportive.
I think on a more musical note and stuff and techniques that you implement, you've been born and raised into jazz and just I think on like improvisation, it's obviously a key element in jazz. When you were younger and growing up in it, how did you hone this skill?
Right. Well, before I was ever singing jazz, I started singing professionally jazz music at 9 years old. But before that, I was always in
Mm-hmm.
choirs, playing piano and trumpet. My ear training was strong. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I was obsessed. Like my first passion was Baroque music, Bach, Handel, all that stuff. For some reason, maybe I had a past life. I don't know. I was always obsessed with trying to learn like all these lines and seeing the lines in my brain, like physically seeing these, visualizing these lines
Mm.
intertwining with each other. And then when I started to sing bebop stuff, I started to notice the similarities between, so my ear training and years of singing Baroque music, practicing
Hmm.
preludes like ba da da ba da da ba ba da 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 ba 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 da da ba ba, trying to like get in the pitch every time
Hmm.
trained me for having the vocal placement for bebop. And then I noticed, oh, these are very similar styles of, the lineage is so connected when you just put a swing groove, and you can start to mix the vocabulary from each of these.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
cool.
that's an interesting term. It is vocabulary. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like music is, you think of it like a language,
Uh-huh.
the genres are like, jazz is kind of like romance languages. There's different
Hmm.
kinds of jazz that are like, French, Portuguese that have similarities, but the languages are still very different. And I
Hmm.
noticed at a young age that um, the notes are like the words and the musical phrases are like sentences that give the words
Hmm.
context. And so knowing that, then, using your ear and learning solos or lines from famous recordings, that's like
Hmm.
where then you understand where the grammar is. That's learning the theory. So putting all that together, and of course not being afraid to just take that. I think the biggest hang up that a lot of young singers, especially and musicians, have is taking that first step being like, but I'm gonna suck at it. Of course you're gonna suck at it. You've never done it before. I
Yeah.
sucked at it when I started. And just taking that first step into like improvisation, it's such an uncomfortable place for human beings, right? Because
Hmm. Yep.
but I've learned so much from
Absolutely.
less is more too. Like it's just like with
Hmm.
conversation.
That's really interesting how you visualize things and you can kind of see where they intersect. And it really is like a language.
And playing piano helps us visualize that because you can literally see it, like when you look down at your hands, see how they
Hmm.
interplay.
A little bit separate on my like personal musical thing, like growing up in it. When I eventually started to like play with the piano, but it made sense. It all made sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that light bulb moment where it's like you can hear these things, but it's just the connections, the synapse in the brain between muscles and
Hmm.
ear. And then when that happens, it's like, aha, now I get.
Yes. I think we've reviewed your journey and inspirations within the conception of your musical journey, but I wanted to hear more about specifically what this album means to you. We did review a little bit, but could you tell me a bit more?
Sure. As I said earlier, this album has a few, there's a few reasons why I did it. First off, obviously, this isn't an album about look at all the styles of Veronica Swift that she sings. Look at all the. It's not that's not what it's about. This
Mm.
album is the first step into. Think of it like a tree. The first step into my career and my artistry. That this is the focal point of all the elements of who I am. And there's the roots. A tree has its roots, and I've just spent 20 years of a career growing and establishing those strong roots in jazz and in theater, and that the technique, the musical technique, the craft work, because that's something that social media fails to address is the craft. It's so focused on the product and the final product and comparing everybody's product to yourself. And I need to get like that. I want that. But the how to get there is so much more important, and that gets lost.
Mhm.
And so I think of it like a tree, you spend all this time, the roots, and the tree it grows from the bottom up, right? The ground up.
Mhm.
And then this album, my self-titled album, it's kind of like my mission statement artistically in life moving forward, that I've established now the trunk. This is the base, the strong,
Mhm.
focal center of the tree that through which all the branches of my artistry will grow. It may
Yeah.
go rock and roll and like next might be a originals album with theater rock and Queen kind of stuff. And then there might be a branch down the road that's a film script that I'm writing or for a
Mhm.
Netflix series or who knows. But
It's not contained.
exactly, and it doesn't have to be. No one's ever has to be. You know what's right for you, but to have something, a statement that's that focal point for everything to connect back to
Mhm.
is super important. That's the only way to really successfully do this kind of thing.
For you personally, have you had moments of satisfaction or pride or anything like that?
Well, um, honestly, this is to my detriment because there's pros and cons. Like some people are able to enjoy their body of work, and maybe when I'm older, who the hell knows? But I have always been the kind of person that's so future oriented. Like I've had this record that came out planned for the last 10 years. Every song pretty much was already picked out. And some people look at me like I'm crazy because it's like you want to allow for, life to kind of bring you new things. You never know. And that's true. Like I'm very open-minded to and
Mhm.
to receiving what life has to offer and bring in the moment. But it's been a very interesting and hard lesson in how to be in the present moment because there is really no such thing as the future. If you think
Mhm.
about it, it's always just a conjecture. It's always like, oh, like this will happen, but it's not actually happening. The future is now. I mean, as cliche as
Mhm.
that sounds. And some people look more to the past, some people look more to the future like me. So I think this has been a lesson in trying to stay present because then if you're
Mhm.
always focused on what's next, you're never able to enjoy, you know, the
Yeah.
moment that's happening right now. And that's what everything's about.
Yeah, absolutely. What advice do you have for people trying to break into the music or jazz industry?
Well, the music industry or the jazz industry, because those are two completely different animals you have
Maybe
to
maybe
begin with.
both? Like each individually?
I mean, I don't have any faith in the music industry as a whole because it's changing every day and
Hmm.
I see too many things. The further I get into it, I see how so much is just controlled by the gatekeepers, and artists like me very rarely penetrate that part of the world in the mainstream sense.
Hmm.
But I think doesn't matter jazz industry, whatever you want to do, people who are listening, make it your industry. The only way you're going to capture people's attention is if you bring something that's unique to you. Um, Too many times I see like artists who are, they want to, if your goal is to be famous, that's one thing. I never had that goal personally, or to be rich. My goal was just to sing all this music and have it make sense and it's not seen as, oh, like she's all over the place. That's been my goal. And so
Hmm.
really, number one, know what your goals are and don't stray from that because then people will look at you and say, well, he or she's all over the place or they's all over the place. But I think the biggest advice is to just find that thing that's uniquely yours and allow that to like inform whatever your style may go here or there. But as long as you are an integrity with what is uniquely yours. For example, born in if you were born in Israel and you come to America and you want to sing jazz or you want to sing, I have some students like this, and they don't bring their heritage into their artistry, and I think that's a mistake. You should,
Hmm.
even if it's not you're not singing, in Hebrew or whatever, have that inform whether it's the harmonically or rhythmically or something that's uniquely yours. Find that thing.
Hmm. That's great. Thank you so much, Veronica. Thank you for sharing and thanks for talking about your new album. This has been wonderful.
Thank you. I hope that everybody who listens to this feels inspired that, see it's working, this kind of cross-genre, multi-artistry, multi-medium artistry does and can work. And it is cohesive because it's your voice that connects it all. So I hope whoever listens to this record in their own life is able to then embrace and to explore every facet of their creative venture.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Artist Banter. And a special thank you to our guest, Veronica Swift, for being here today. Again, Veronica Swift will be performing her new self titled album, Veronica Swift, at Pepperdine University in Malibu on October 17th at 8 p.m. Tickets are available at veronicaswift.com. If you want to hear more from local contributors of art and music or follow along for future conversations, check out our website, daily49er.com, and our socials at daily49er. To keep up to date with Veronica's future performances and releases, check her out on all major music platforms and follow her on Instagram at Veronica Swift Official. Veronica, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, sure. Anybody who wants to come see the show in Pepperdine next week, I always come out and say hey to everybody. I say hello and like to talk and meet new people. And I live here, so if you're living in Los Angeles, come meet me and say hi, and maybe we'll see each other around. I'm super friendly. I don't bite. But for any of you jazz fans, rock fans, theater fans, classical music fans, no matter what, we do it all and in an authentic way, and we embrace and explore and celebrate all kinds of music for all kinds of people. So come on out.
Really exciting. We appreciate you being here. Take care and see you soon.
You bet.
Bye.